Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me.
What, unintentional sin versus intentional sin.
Right.
Willful, intentional sin. Shaking your fist.
I know that's wrong, but I'm going to do that anyway.
Yeah.
You told me not to do it, but I'm still going to do
a man
it.
gathering sticks on it. See, that's something where the church. I've heard preachers teach about the man gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Oh, this is the harsh God of the Old Testament, and they were under the law, and look, you don't want to go back under that, because if you break the Sabbath, you're going to be cursed and you're going to die, and they just make the Torah this terrible thing. But then they take this out of context, the man gathering sticks, and they don't tie it to the previous.
What he said just in the verse before.
Because you've got everything in the Torah is laid out,
sin.
and it's all laid out. There's a principle that's given, and then there's an example of what happened. Like Nadab and Abihu offered up strange fire, and then right after that you have
don't drink when you serve.
Exactly. Don't get intoxicated. So obviously they were intoxicated when they were doing that. Same thing with the man gathering sticks. This is not speaking about this like Marcion, the heretic, taught about he called the God of the Old Testament the demiurge, or demiurge in Greek, where this is the God of anger and of judgment, and it had to be an inferior God to the God of the New Testament, which was a God of love and mercy and grace, and that was Jesus. And basically he's turned the God of the Old Testament into Satan, the devil. And unfortunately, this mentality kind of sometimes exists in the Christian church. But the guy gathering sticks, look, they had the manna, they had all those things.
Lessons and lessons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. About what was accepted and what wasn't accepted.
I mean, there was no question about that. Anyway, I know that wasn't your question, but I wanted to.
Well, no, I knew.
But you stumbled. Look, Angie, there's a difference between going along the path of life and stumbling.
Right.
Okay? People stumble.
And he's merciful above all else.
Look, as we go through life, we get hit with things. We get hit with things. Trauma, things happen in our lives, and it's just like, whoa, what was it? And we don't always know how to respond. That's where His mercy and His grace comes in.
Yeah.
Okay? You're driving your car down the road, and your tire hits a pothole, and you get a flat tire. That was unpredicted. You couldn't control that. You didn't know it was there, etc., etc. There's mercy and grace for that. The fact, and like I've heard it said, the fact that you made teshuvah and you came back shows you did not lose your salvation. It shows that otherwise you wouldn't have done that. You would have been like some of these
just keep down the path.
In Psalm 5:5, it says God hates, and it means hate, the workers of iniquity. There are people, and you're not this kind of person, nobody in this room is, but there are people that have sold themselves out to do evil, to the point they are past redemption. They cannot be saved. I can't judge who that is, but maybe somebody like a Hitler, I don't know. But, who's to say? But they've sold themselves out. And they literally have sold themselves to the devil in one way or the other. And they cannot be redeemed. And it's those people, when they've crossed over that point, those are the people that God hates. People say, well, God doesn't hate. Oh, yes, He does. And there's a dozen scriptures in the Bible that talk about this. Now, we don't want to hate them. We want to hate what they do and love them, because we aren't able to look perfectly in and see who He hates and who He doesn't, because we can't read hearts. But Elohim can. And I think He's talking about those kind of people. Okay? And then it's mentioned in Hebrews 6 and Hebrews 10. The writer of Hebrews talks about what's called the unpardonable sin. And I've heard many Christian teachers teach about this, and I think they're correct. If anybody had committed the unpardonable sin, they wouldn't be sitting in here today. They'd be still out there running and shaking their fist and living in utter rebellion. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Look,
That's good clarification.
And you're
That's
not,
good.
you're not the only one that's asked that question. I've had a lot of people over the years as a shepherd come and ask that question. I said, because they're still living. So you need living under that guilt. So if you have any question at all about his forgiveness, I'm going to turn the tables on you, then you need to ask his forgiveness for not believing in his forgiveness. You see, there's three
Say,
parts.
Father, take this guilt away from
Right,
me.
exactly.
I'm feeling
Well,
guilt.
he
still.
said he'll separate your sins as far as the east from the west, Psalm 103. There's three aspects of forgiveness. Three aspects. A lot of people don't realize this. When you're doing ministry, deliverance and the healing, kind of inner healing, you have to step through these things. Number one, three aspects. If you have sinned, then you got to ask his forgiveness. That's number one. Number two, you got to forgive other people. Number three, you've got to believe that he has forgiven you. Well, you got to forgive yourself. You got to receive his forgiveness, and you've got to forgive others.
Yeah.
And some people will not forgive others, but they forgive themselves, or they'll accept, whatever. They don't get them all.
They miss one part of that.
You got to do all of those
They don't
things to
get the
get
full healing.
full healing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I really believe that there's grace for that. There's grace because when things hit us sideways in life, we haven't been there before. We haven't walked in that situation. And sometimes we're spinning and we don't know what to do, and we're caught at a weak place and we stumble. That's different than defiantly going out and rebel. Look, that's why Israel, when they went to, they brought back the evil report from the land of Canaan. At least the 10 of the 12 spies did. And then the people defiantly, he said, well, you're going to wander here for 40 years because you had unbelief.
He said, no, we won't. We're going to go in and take that land anyway. Right?
And then what happened to them? Judgment. That was unpardonable sin. And those were
people died for
defiant.
that.
Yeah.
They died.
He told them not to. They did it anyway. Yeah.
There's another example of it.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes.
The Ananias and Sapphira.
Exactly.
That's
They lied to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
and what happened?
They dropped dead.
They're the ones that
And
got
mark that.
Yeah.
That was in the so-called dispensation of grace.
Right.
When that happened.
That's exactly.
That was after the cross. People said, well, we're under grace now. So, this God is evil, God of the Old Testament. That doesn't, these kind of things don't happen. That shows you that that's a false paradigm. That's a lie from the pit of hell. The wages of sin is death. Period.
Always has been.
And in this case, that's good. They knew better. They lied. They lied about the offering. Ananias and Sapphira, they lied about the offering because they wanted to keep a little bit back. It was in their.
Stealing from you.
No, it wasn't that.
No?
Well, no, it wasn't that.
Oh.
Look, they sold a property for $100. Let's say they sold it for $100.
Right.
They could have given him $10 of it, a tithe, or $50, or $99.99, and kept. But they represented. It was in their power to give the whole thing or part of it. But they represented that they gave the whole thing.
This is everything.
When in reality, they gave $80 and they kept 20, but they said they gave the whole thing. They were
Misrepresented.
pride and arrogance and lying. That's what their sin was. And Peter asked Ananias, and he said, and he said, and when Sapphira came, he asked her, "Did you sell this for such and such?" Yeah, and she lied. They were
Carried
in
them both
cahoots.
out. Yep.
And look, so his judgments are still there. If we don't get struck with the proverbial lightning bolt because we've sinned, you better be thankful for his mercy and grace, and we better ask forgiveness right away. Because if we don't, and we know better, it could happen. Several years ago, I was struggling with a sin in my life that nobody knew about, and I was getting down a ladder off of my truck. which I do all the time because I keep my ladders up on my truck. I'm up and down off of there several times a day during the work week. Rain or shine. And I have non-skid things I can step on so I don't go sliding off. And I got up there the next morning, the next day, and I slid off the top of my truck. Now, the top of my dump truck's only about this tall. I can jump off of something that tall, and it won't bother me. I jump off of walls and fences all the time. But I slid off and wasn't prepared, and I landed on this ankle, and I had a terribly sprained ankle for the next 6 weeks, could hardly even walk. I go, Lord, okay, I'm done with that sin, because next time I might fall and break my neck. You know, he woke me up. You see, he was merciful. He says, don't go down that path, because if you do, and you know, then you just want to stop before you keep going, because one thing can lead to another. Yeah, I think you. Well, you had a same thing. I thought you were over there snickering. Anybody have that happen? You know, listen to him. He's loving. He's going to give us a little swat on the behind, and then if we don't listen to him, then it might be, maybe 3 or 4, and then after that he's going to pull off the belt like my dad used to do.
Balaam's ass,
the leather,
Yeah.
leather belt, and
On the path.
we get lax, just like I was getting lax in some areas in my life, and I literally slid off that truck. I was wearing heavy boots and everything. I should have twisted my ankle. I couldn't even walk on it for 2 days. It was twisted. It was that I hadn't sprained it that bad in my life. Didn't break anything. I finally got a Spanish and taped up, and I was able to hobble around a little bit, and it got better. But it took me a while, and it was sore for the next like 4 months. I had my daughter massaging it. It was like it was reminding me, don't do that. And I haven't. I was like, Lord, I got the message. So, sometimes we need to have things happen to wake us up out of our spiritual doldrums so that we don't. That's so we don't continue down a slippery slope. I suspect that Israel was in they were starting to slip, and he had to get their attention in both the Uzzah situation as well as Ananias and Sapphira.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He is near, he is near, he is near. Yeshu Hashem Behir Matzov Kerabu Yoto Karov Karov Yasov Rashad Darko Yeisha Ben Machshevotav Yashovel Adom Shem Ki Arbe Is Yeshu Hashem Behim Matzo Keravu Yota Karo Karo Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He is near, he is near. Yeshua Hashem Behim Matzor Kerahu